Talents should be changed regularly based on the encounter you're doing. For this guide, I'm going to only reference encounters and Throne of Thunder for their uses. For the crowd control tier, it's safe just to take Void Tendrils. Its instant cast, requires no target or targeting circle, and is the best root in the game. Most mobs in TOT are immune to them, but it does work on some of them, like the ones that spawn from Lei Shin. You can root them and stand back and Atonement heal your tendrils and have them tank for you. Fiend was amazing for one fight last tier. This tier, almost all mobs are immune to fear. Dominate Mind does not work on any trash or ads and raids, but it's a lot of fun in dungeons and PvP. Did you know that you can set a campfire while mind controlling another player? It's awesome, you should try it out. For the movement tier, Body and Soul is the best. Whenever you bubble someone, they get a 60% speed increase for 4 seconds, which is mostly used on yourself to get yourself out of fire faster. The downside, though, is that Power Word Shield costs a lot of mana, so you can't just be sprinting around everywhere. Angelic Feather gives you a 60% speed increase for 6 seconds, 2 seconds longer than Body and Soul. Angelic Feather costs no mana and has 3 separate cooldowns, but it requires a targeting circle. If you're too close to someone else, they can accidentally pick it up instead of you. For most fights, Body and Soul work just fine, but for the Bird Boss, this ability will allow you to not get knocked off the platform during downdraft, and Body and Soul will not. That's the only fight, though, where this talent is the better choice. For almost every other fight, you can just take Body and Soul and be fine. Phantasm is useless. It's a terrible ability and should never be taken for raiding. Now, that's not to say it's useless entirely. I mean, you can use it on some fights to break roots, but Dispel removes those same exact roots without requiring you to give up 2 other amazing talents for it. For the mana tier, From Darkness Comes Light sucks. I know you're going to be using Smite a lot, so you'll probably get a lot of procs from it, but rarely are those procs ever needed. During my testing of this ability, the procs go to overhealing so much, and just casting another Smite for a smart heal is way better. Plus, the other 2 talents in this tier are way better. Mindbender. This guy will let you do more DPS if you're doing Atonement healing because you're being the 0.5 healer. But Solace does give back more mana. There are some fights where you can't Atonement heal, like the first half of Dark Animus, and the guy who sounds like Gollum from Lord of the Rings. So for those 2 fights, you take Mindbender no matter what. Power Word Solace. Before its change, it was pretty bad, but now it's super amazing. What it does is replace Holy Fire, does the same damage, and has the same cooldown. It also does increase smite damage through the Glyph of Smite, exactly like Holy Fire does. But you don't want to use that glyph anymore unless you're being the 0.5 healer. Now, Solace costs no mana, and in fact gives you 1% of your mana. Holy Fire, on the other hand, costs 1.8% mana. So with Solace and the fact that you're watching an Atonement guide where you're using Holy Fire all the time anyway, it's like getting about 3% mana from every cast with a combination of saving 2% and gaining 1%. Mindbender gives 1.4% mana back with every hit, and hits about 10 times during his duration, which comes out to about 43,800 mana. Shadow Fiend gives 3% mana back every time he attacks, and will attack about 8 times during his duration, which comes out to about 72,000 mana. But since he can only come out once every 3 minutes, you divide the 72,000 by 3 for 24,000 mana per minute. Solace can be used 6 times a minute for 1% per use, which comes out to 18,000 mana per minute. Holy Fire, assuming you have 5 stacks of Evangelism for the minimum mana cost possible, costs 28,800 mana per minute to use. So with Mindbender, you get 43,800 mana per minute, but subtracting having to spend mana on Holy Fire comes out to a net gain of 15,000 mana per minute. Now, Solace is a net gain of 18,000 mana per minute, which is already more than Mindbender. But you also have Shadow Fiend, which is an additional 24,000 mana per minute, for a net gain of 42,000 mana per minute. So to recap all that math, Mindbender is a gain of 15,000 mana per minute, while Solace is a gain of 42,000 mana per minute, almost 3 times as much mana as Mindbender. Plus, Solace is an actual HPS increase over Mindbender after the Atonement nerf. Solace will heal for 100% of the damage it does, while Holy Fire only heals for 90%. That's because Solace has its own separate effect that works just like Atonement, but is not Atonement. Solace gives back 3 times as much mana as Mindbender, and is an HPS increase for Atonement priests. Definitely the clear winner. Well, not really clear. You'd never know if you didn't do the math, since Mindbender is usually better because it's way easier to manage. And if you know you're not going to be able to use Solace the 6 times per minute, more likely 5 times per minute, it still comes out better, but Mindbender is a lot easier to use, and is definitely okay to use that instead. Now for the survival tier. First up, we have Desperate Prayer, an ability that's been in the game for quite some time. It's an instant cast self-heal that costs no mana and can crit. It's like a super health stone. If you want an extra button on your action bar, this is a really great skill to have. It's really good, but there's just one other talent in this tier that's a tiny bit better. Spectral Guise does not work on raid bosses, so it's useless for raiding, but pretty fun in PvP. Now, Angelic Bulwark, an automatic shield that absorbs 20% of your maximum health that pops if you fall below 30% health. Now, while Desperate Prayer does heal for 10% more, Bulwark is not affected by Mastery, and Prayer is, but only if Prayer crits. Bulwark is a passive ability. Both Prayer and Bulwark have the same cooldown. It's just one requires you to actually react to the damage, and the other one works on its own. Now, if you fall from 31% health to 0, Bulwark will not proc. So choosing either Bulwark or Prayer is a personal preference, and there is no fight like last year where you cannot use it like the first boss in Heart of Fear. Because the first boss in Heart and Fear, you had to be DPS down to 50% health in order for them to break you out of the mind control. And what sometimes would happen is they'd go from like 55 to below 30 in one hit, and it would proc Bulwark, which would give you an extra 20% bubble for your health. And since you have an increased health pool while you were mind controlled, it was something you didn't want to risk happening. So you wouldn't take Bulwark for that fight. But there's no fights like that in Throne of Thunder, so you can just take Bulwark and forget about it. For your healing output talents, Twist of Fate sucks a hard one. You get a 15% damage and healing buff when you attack a target below 20% health, or heal a target below 20% health. Now, raid members do not drop that low often, so the only real fights where this would be useful would be ad fights, and even then it's questionable over the other talents. As an Atonement Priest, you get to double dip from the damage and healing buff it gives you, so it's a really good buff for you. But it only being able to proc at below 20% health, it's rarely up. Now, the next patch, when Blizz changes it to 35% and below, it might be worth using, but for now it's crap. Power Infusion is amazing though. There is really no downside to this spell. It gives you 20% haste, 20% cheaper spells, and on top of that a 5% damage boost. Lasts 20 seconds. That's 10 seconds longer than most other cooldowns with the same effect, or that are other 2-minute cooldowns. Use it for heavy damage or just use it off cooldown. How you use it depends on the fight. Divine Insight is a nice tank healing talent, and is pretty good in challenge modes, but not so good for Atonement Priests, as it does nothing for us. Maybe if they changed it so the power word shield was mana free as well, it might be better. Or even if it was a 100% chance to proc, but as it is now, it's kinda lame when compared to the super amazing talent like Power Infusion. They are going to change it to 100% proc rate in the next patch, which might make it worth using. And finally, your level 90 talents. Now, all 3 talents are useful, with Cascade and Divine Star being used the most. Cascade is good on every single fight. It hits 15 targets and has a ridiculous range. Greatest on fights where you're spread out or need a quick burst AoE healing. The downside to it though is it costs too much mana to be just used off cooldown, so you can only really afford to use it when you need it. Divine Star is best for fights where you have to stack an AoE heal, like the Hydra boss or Lei Shen. It's more mana efficient than Prayer of Healing and heals everyone it hits, but it is a skill shot, so you have to make sure you're not standing in the middle of everyone and that you're kind of standing on the edge of people. Kind of like if you were using the flashlight ability that paladins have. Halo is only good on one fight, and on that one fight, it's actually really good. Tortoise, the turtle boss. He does an earthquake every 50 seconds that hits everyone in the raid one time and stuns them for 1 second. So what you can do is just run to the middle of the room and use Halo a second before he finishes casting his Quake ability. And it'll hit everyone while they're stunned for a huge burst of healing. Halo will be up for every single Quake, and it's like this boss was made just to give Halo a good fight. For glyphs, I'm only going to be talking about the majors. Minor glyphs are just for fun. Choose whichever one you want. First off, you're going to need Glyph of Penance. The mobility it gives you is incredible. The Glyph of Penance, you only ever have to stand still to cast Smite or Prayer of Healing. Plus, you'll never have to interrupt your hardest hitting spell. Unless you're doing Dark Animas, then you're going to have to get used to hitting Escape, besides jumping. Second, you're either going to want Prayer of Mending or Binding Heal Glyph. Prayer of Mending doesn't jump all 5 times, more than half the time. In fact, in some fights it'll only go all 5 bounces once. So depending on the fight, you either use the glyph or avoid it like the plague, especially if you have the 2-set bonus. The increase from the 2-set bonus doesn't start until the second bounce if you use the glyph. So the first bounce will get the 60% increase, and then the second bounce won't get a 20% increase like the 2-set bonus says it will. It'll only get a 10% increase, and the third bounce will get a 20%, and so on. So it's really bad if you have the 2-set bonus. Binding Heal Glyph should only be used on fights where you're isolated with less than 5 people away from the rest of the raid in a small spot where everyone takes damage at the same time. That would include the Bird Boss and Heroic Recon, Lei Shin, and standing in beams on Darumu. So there are quite a few bosses this tier where it is useful, but it costs a lot of mana, so be wary. If you're being the 0.5 healer, take Glyph of Smite. It increases your damage by quite a bit. Also, if you just want to help out with the DPS a little bit, you can take it as well, since you only really need penance. If you know you're going to be at max range a lot, take Glyph of Holy Fire for the extra 10 yards. It's ridiculous we even need a glyph to hit 40 yards away. There are some fights where it's needed. If you have the 2-set bonus, and you don't need to heal 3 to 4 people at the same time quickly, and are on a boss with a huge hit range, you can take Glyph of Inner Sanctum and Fade. Both are just flat damage reducers, and the less damage you take is always better in a raiding environment. So you get 6% less damage total, since you should be using Inner Fire all the time anyway. Or you run faster than everyone else, since you'll be running 16% faster if you happen to use Inner Will. Plus Fade has the 10% damage reduction when you use it, which is actually pretty good for raid fights. Like if you need to stack up for the Lei Shin transition phases, where you have to go up. Anyways, if you do Lei Shin, you know it's useful. All other glyphs are not used for Atonement Priest, or just suck really bad. Like, Glyph of Reflect Shield is terrible, Glyph of Dispel Magics is terrible, and so on and so on.